Next to Minnesota, California is the poster child of how not to conduct your elections, unless you want everybody not trusting the election process because it lacks integrity at almost every single level. We had special elections across the country on Tuesday earlier this week. We know the results of all of those other elections across the country. Where don't we know the results? California. Why? Because they're still going and picking up ballots. And to make it worse, they're actually using helicopters to fly to different areas of Southern California to go and pick up the ballots that were postmarked on time in order to deliver them for counting. As somebody who was born and raised in Southern California, as you'll see in this report, all of these various areas that they're talking about, they're all within driving distance. They are not that far from where they need to go and do the vote count. You want to talk about losing faith in your election process? Watch this video. This is how you lose faith in the election process.
The LA County Sheriff's Department is flying in ballots from vote centers across the region. You can see the choppers landing right now. We're standing in the parking lot of the LA County Registrar's Ballot Processing Center. They land right here in the middle, and then you see workers, they're standing by to pick up those ballots and take them inside. They're picking up ballots from 8 cities, including Lancaster, Santa Clarita, Palmdale, Lakewood, Santa Monica, Van Nuys, Pomona, and Torrance. Once they arrive, the ballots are securely transferred inside, where election workers are receiving and processing millions of ballots. While most ballots are transported by vehicle, election officials use helicopters to bring in ballots from some of the county's farthest vote centers.
Election fraud takes place. The question is always, is it enough to go and sway elections? I don't trust any of this right now. And with Spencer Pratt in second place and only 6 points above the third place finisher, therefore advancing to a runoff against Karen Bass, and the continued grabbing of ballots that haven't been brought in, I just keep waiting to see the news story that Spencer Pratt ends up falling to third place and will not advance to the runoff election. I pray that doesn't happen, but I don't trust anything that I'm seeing right now coming out of California, and you shouldn't either.
What's up, family? Hit the like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and check this out because we need to talk about California special elections happened across this country earlier this week, and we got results from every single state that held one. Every state except California. And if you're sitting there wondering why, the answer they're giving people is that they're still out here picking ballots days later, and not just picking them up in trucks or vans you'll like, except they are flying them in by helicopter. And I'm not exaggerating, as you guys just heard. That is actually happening. And look, I want to be clear before we get into this. This is not about one party winning or losing. This is about whether regular people can look at the process and feel confident that their vote counts the same as everybody else's. Because right now, a lot of people can't. So let's break this down in plain English, because the headline alone sounds like something out of a movie, but this actually happened. The LA County Sheriff's Department was literally flying ballots in from vote centers across the region: 8 cities, family, Lancaster, Santa Clarita, Palmdale, Lakewood, Santa Monica, Venice, Pomona, and Torrance. Helicopters landed in the parking lot outside the LA County Registrar's office, while workers stood by to grab those ballots and carry them inside for processing. And the official explanation from election officials is that helicopters get used for some of the county's furthest vote centers to make sure everything arrives on time. Now, to be fair, that explanation makes some surface level sense, because if you got a massive county and you're running against a clock, you want everything in. I get that. But here's where a lot of people start pumping the brakes, because the cities they named, Lancaster, Santa Clarita, Palmdale, those are not remote mountain towns cut off from the road system. People who grew up in Southern California will tell you straight up that those areas are well within driving distance of where the vote count or where the count needs to happen. And they are not isolated. There are roads, there are highways. These are places people commute from every single day. And that gap between the official explanation and the common sense reality is exactly where public trust starts to crack. And think about it like this. Imagine your employer told you they were sending your paycheck by a completely different method than every other employee's check. And when you asked why, they said it was just the most efficient option. You might not call them a liar, but you're giving but you're going to ask questions. Is my point, and you have every right to have those questions. That's not being paranoid. That's being a grown adult who pays attention, and that's the real issue here. Not necessarily that something went wrong, but that the process created more questions than it answered. And when election officials use an unusual method and the public responds with skepticism, the answer should be more transparency, not less. Walk people through it, show your work, because perception matters enormously when it comes to elections. If people watch helicopters landing in a parking lot to drop off ballots and think that doesn't look right, that feeling does not go away just because someone uses a statement saying everything was handled securely. Trust is earned through a process that looks clean from the outside, not just one that officials tell you is clean from the inside. And the helicopter story, as wild as it is, or as wild as it looks, is honestly just the entry point here. Because when you start pulling the thread on how California runs its elections overall, there are a lot more questions waiting underneath.
Looks like the left is cheating in yet another election, but what else is new?
26 people registered to a porta-john and an empty parking lot. Where do their ballots go?
If that isn't enough to convince you that California elections are completely fraudulent, I don't know what will. Californians and Angelinos are done being defrauded. They're done with criminal politicians who lied, cheated, and stole their way to the top, who do not represent us, and whose salaries we pay. Are you kidding? Are you kidding? We pay their salaries. Judicial Watch has literally been suing the county of Los Angeles for their voter rolls, which I believe it's like 800,000 voters or something should be scrubbed because they're dead, because those people no longer live there, because they moved addresses, because they're inaccurate. And it just makes sense that voter rolls should be kept accurate. I should probably do an entire video about all the ways that cheating in the elections happens, what voter fraud actually is, how it works. Another way is on your ballot, if your signature doesn't match the signature on file in your voter record, your ballot can be rejected. Problem with that is people don't really know if their signatures match what's on their voter record because the signature could be 20, 30 years old in some cases. For elderly people in the city, they may be matching it to a signature that was on file from the DMV 20 years ago that they have no idea is going to invalidate their vote in 2026. Election laws have changed. They now have 30 days to count ballots. They can actually accept ballots up to 7 days after election day, and then they count for 30 days after that. 37 days to count elections in California. That's where we're at. Third world country type stuff. You literally have third world countries that count their votes for an election faster than the state of California, which I believe is the 5th largest economy in the entire world. So if you don't have an accurate, honest election, how can we trust the results? And I think any logical person can agree with that. This is not about left, right, label of Democrat or Republican. This is just about honesty and integrity. And if we are supposed to be represented by our elected leaders, we should have the confidence that the people who are elected are actually the people that we wanted to be elected. What's going on in California is a pseudo dictatorship, and it's despicable, it's criminal. I believe that because of Spencer Pratt, because this was such a controversial campaign that garnered so much media attention, maybe this is what LA and California really needs to fix these core problems that will plague our city and our state for decades to come until we actually take action legally, because the left has codified these cheating tactics into law. That's a huge problem. And that's why we research socialist and communist countries. It's exactly what happened in those countries. Then the elections get canceled, and before you know it, you have a dictator. People want to say Trump is a dictator, but it's not looking too good for the left right about now.
Now, here's where the conversation gets a little heavier because we need to talk about something that California actually made into law. And I want you to really sit with this for a second. In the state of California, you are not allowed to show your ID when you vote. And I don't mean they don't require it. I mean, it is actually illegal for a poll worker to ask you for it. And before you dismiss that as a small thing, think about what we do require ID for in this country: buying a beer, boarding a plane, picking up a prescription, opening a bank account, getting into a nightclub. And if you walked into a government office tomorrow to handle any kind of official business, the first thing they're going to ask you for is some form of identification, because that is how you verify that a person is who they say they are. And yet, the one civic act that is supposed to be the purest expression of your voice as a citizen the one thing that the entire system of self governance rests on. That's the one place where California decided identification is off the table entirely. And I'm not here to tell you what to think, but I do think you deserve to sit with that and ask yourself whether that makes sense to you, because there's literally no other context in adult life where we say showing who you are is too much to ask. And on top of no voter ID, California also operates a universal mail in ballot system, which means every single registered voter in the state gets a ballot sent to their address, whether they ask for it or not. And that sounds convenient on the surface. And to be fair, supporters of that system will tell you it increases access and participation. And that is a real argument worth taking seriously, because there are people who genuinely struggle to make it to the polling place on election day, working double shifts, no transportation, dealing with health issues. And mail in voting solves a real problem for those folks. I hear that. But here's where the common sense part of my brain starts raising its hand, because the system only works if the list of addresses those ballots are going to is actually accurate. And that is exactly where Judicial Watch stepped in and filed a lawsuit against LA County over the state of their voter rolls. And according to that lawsuit, there are hundreds of thousands of names on those rolls that should have been cleaned up. People who passed away, people who moved to a different state, people who changed their address and notified the state, but somehow still have a live ballot floating around with their old name on it. And we're not talking about a rounding error here. We're talking about a number that Judicial Watch put around 800,000 entries that could, in theory, be used without anyone ever knowing the difference between because there is no ID checked on the other end to catch it. And people who have left California have said they notified the state, sent letters saying they no longer live there and they don't need a ballot. And the ballot still showed up at their old address. And from my perspective, access and integrity are not opposites. You can build a system that makes voting easy and keeps the rolls clean and requires some form of verification. Those things are not in conflict with each other. And the fact that we keep being told we have to choose between access and security is itself the problem, because a well-run system should be able to deliver both. And when it can't or won't, regular people start losing faith. And when regular people lose faith in elections, they stop participating. And that is genuinely bad for everyone, no matter which side of the aisle you sit on.
The interesting thing is that there is a Supreme Court case pending right now. The court's already heard it. We're waiting at this end of the term in June. We get all of these last decisions, the big ones. This one came out of Mississippi, and it deals with a state law that says how long you can count ballots after Election Day, if they're postmarked, what the grace period is there. So I can't wait. We're going to get opinions next Thursday. Maybe that's in the pile, but it's certainly something that could be a big resounding ripple effect across the country based on what they decide in Mississippi.
Yeah, this all changed during COVID. And California changed, like they were on steroids, the way they were changing their election laws in 2001, just extending the grace period that they were giving so many people. And it's led to this. And, Shannon, it's flown under the radar, because we've been focused on national elections 2 years ago and the midterms 2 years before that. But California, like determining the balance of power in the House, we've been waiting on California for 4 years now. And yet again, we've got this one. Meanwhile, in this.
So there you have it. I think COVID was used as an excuse to justify a lot of things that individuals know they shouldn't have been doing, but absorbed themselves from it in the name of COVID as a loophole to do things they know weren't right. And on the brink of it, it just makes me question and wonder. COVID opened up a lot of things that should never happen in the first place. And now, if any other health episode happened in the country, God forbid, or anything like that, it makes you wonder what type of other loopholes would they extrapolate to justify, to basically try to absorb themselves, using that as an excuse to why they should have done something they shouldn't have done. Just like in the name of COVID, they constantly use things, for example, to allow these things with elections. In California, it pertains to, as we're talking specifically about California. But the bigger constitutional conversation starts to come in, because this is not just a California problem anymore. The Supreme Court is actually looking into it, you heard. And the case came out of Mississippi and it deals specifically with the question of how long a state can keep counting mail in ballots after Election Day. And the way it works in a lot of states, California included, is that a ballot just needs to be postmarketed by Election Day, meaning it can physically arrive at the counting center days after the polls close and still be counted. And California actually extended that grace period in recent years, and not by a little. They were moving fast on those changes, which I say, in the name of COVID, they use a lot of things to absolve themselves from doing things they shouldn't have done because basically it looks at, even though it was a horrific time in history in this country with COVID and lives being lost, it seems like the public servants that's supposed to be working for the public was doing things behind the scenes while the country was going through a health scare, which is wrong in my opinion or from my perspective, or to basically, backstab citizens in their states. And it makes me question what preventative measures could take place so if any other incident would to occur in this country, public servants wouldn't backstab their citizens because their citizens are basically focused on, overall health and the national health scare and things like that. So if individuals are concerned, public servants should be addressing those concerns for the people. But apparently, in the name of COVID, with money, fraud taking place, and all these things with school systems, basically spending money they didn't have in their regular budget, but used the extra money from COVID to extend to other things they know their budget couldn't manage, basically using COVID as a way to continue to charge up a credit card. They know they eventually will have to pay dues back that they couldn't. And then the community suffer, let alone the children. So it's just mind blowing. That's just one example. This election is another example when it comes to election rules and laws being changed. And it gives off very backstabbish perception, as a lot of citizens would say. So, and this coming out with Mississippi as well, because they were moving fast on those changes, and that extension is a big part of why we are sitting here days after election day and still not have final results. While every other state that held a special election this week already has their numbers locked in, and the Supreme Court's decision in the Mississippi case could send a ripple through every state that operates the same way. So the outcome is not just about Mississippi. It's about the entire framework for how long ballot counting windows stay open across the country. And to be honest, the same day that there's a requirement to vote, I believe it should close the same day that, it occurred. Let me know what you guys think about that. As always, we're just having a conversation, but we could be waiting on that decision right along with the last big rulings of the term. And running alongside that is the SAVE Act, which in plain English is legislation that will require people to show proof of citizenship when they register to vote in a federal election. And critics of the SAVE Act will tell you it creates barrier, particularly for communities that already face obstacles navigating government systems. Basically, in short term, just to be honest with you, some officials believe, they're not saying it straightforward, but they're saying it the political correct way, but I'm giving it to you the straightforward way. They believe that some citizens are basically dumb enough where they can't acquire or get an ID, which we need that in our everyday lives when it comes to driving, et cetera, that I mentioned in the beginning of this video. So I think that counter argument deserves an honest response rather than being dismissed about facing obstacles navigating government systems for why the SAVE Act creates barriers, so called. Because there are real people who would be affected and their concerns are legitimate. But nowadays, you can go online and basically pay and register to get an ID or renew your ID or whatever the case may be and get it mailed out. I think the only time you have to come in is if you're applying for some other form of ID. But other than that, you can do it online for the most part. But from my perspective, the core question the SAVE Act is trying to answer is a fair one, which is how do we confirm the people participating in federal elections are actually eligible to participate? That is not a radical question. That is the baseline standard we apply to almost every other formal civic process in this country. And what makes California so central to this whole debate is that California is not just a big state, its congressional races help determine which party controls the House of Representatives. So when California takes 2 or 3 weeks to finish counting the balance of power in Congress, sits in limbo and the rest of the country is waiting on a process that a growing number of people on both sides are starting to describe as broken. And that brings us to the real takeaway here, family, because this is bigger than California. So I want you guys to check out this next clip.
I'm a very optimistic person. You have to stay on the sunny side of the street in order to continue in this business and not crash out. But I got to tell you, this is a live shot of what's going on in California right now. They are cheating this election right before our very eyes. And I'm not exactly certain what to do about it, except for to call the feds, which there's a big update on that this morning. Look at this, ladies and gentlemen, the absolute state of California elections. While this is a meme, it's a funny one of Gavin Newsom delivering all the ballots, this is a real video of how ballots are being delivered in California by mysterious helicopter. This is from last night. They just fly in helicopters from anywhere they want and drop ballots off into unmarked vans that pull into their voting centers. Not mysterious at all.
The LA County Sheriff's Department is flying in ballots from vote centers across the region. You can see the choppers landing right now. We're standing in the
Normal
parking lot of the
process.
LA County Registrar's ballot processing center. They land right here in the middle.
Totally normal.
And then you see workers, they're standing by to pick up those ballots.
They do all of this. Florida counts 10 million ballots in a single night. We just did this, by the way, like 18 months ago. No helicopters, no shady sheriff's department, no creepy warehouses, no unmarked vans. Just count the ballots where they are and deliver the totals electronically and securely to the Secretary of State. Everything is key carded and monitored and filmed and activated, and you can track everything, and you get a receipt when you vote. You have to show them your ID when you vote, and everything is tight to the letter. It allows for nothing like this. We've actually watched them cheat in real time. These are real-time screenshots during Gavin Newsom's 2021 governor recall in California. They were taken 2 minutes apart. The no votes, so to keep Gavin Newsom, went up by 300,000, and the yes votes went down by 300,000. 2 minutes apart. Look at that. 2 million. And then what happens next? Oh, 1.8. We'll just punch the button. Algorithmic. You know, we caught that on live TV.
8%.
Here's the actual live broadcast from CNN.
Now, if
Pay
I were
attention to
Governor
down
Newsom,
here. Pay attention to right down here.
Feeling pretty good.
Okay.
You would be thinking,
vote,
number one, you're
I'll
going
zoom
to
in.
complete your term.
Watch.
And number two, Governor Newsom made this campaign in the end
Watch it
about
yourself.
Larry Elder, but also about the comparison.
Watch the vote total.
California
Watch what happens
versus,
right here.
say, Florida and Texas on COVID.
They're
If
gonna do
your
an
keep
update.
Newsom number stays anywhere close to that,
Boom.
other governors
There it
are going
is.
to think that it's a mandate by
You
the
can
people
literally
of California.
watch them cheat in real time. How do they get away with it? Well, partly is because there's no voter ID and you can register to vote from anywhere for any purpose at any place. I found this out when I went to a toilet in an empty parking lot in LA. This is the registrar's paperwork that shows that there are 26 registered voters at a stinky porta-john in an empty parking lot at 100 Sunset Avenue in Venice, in Los Angeles. Who do you think voted there? I bet every single one of those 26 ballots got returned in for Karen Bass and Nikki Rahman. And that is why, and this is very depressing, Karen Bass and Nikki Rahman are now skyrocketing in the poly market in order to win and make it to the runoff. And Spencer Pratt is collapsing. Now, is that based on reality? Here's a great question. How exactly are people betting on Rahman overtaking Pratt mathematically with 300,000 votes left? If Bass keeps roughly the same current pace, Rahman would need nearly 59% of the remaining votes to pass him. That's an enormous late break margin. Am I missing something? Yeah, you're missing that California rigs their elections. So here's how they do it. This morning, California was at 58% counted in their governor's race. 15 hours later, it's at 56 counted. So they keep bumping the margins is what happens. Look at that. They keep as they print the ballots that they need. So they just go into a ballot printing factory, print the ballots, and then they just increase the number of total overall votes. It's just simple math. You just continue to expand the voter pool by printing ballots, by going into homeless encampments, manufacturing mail-in ballots. Who cares? You don't need voter IDs. Look at this from the LA County Register. Many voters chose to return their mail-in ballots on election day. Oh, it just so happens to be they've had their mail-in ballots for months, but they just all turned them in on one day. I'm sure that's exactly what happened. These ballots are valid and deserve the same level of care and security. Really, look at how secure this all is. Very secure. Look at that. Looks totally secure. Just stacks on stack. Look at that. Nothing says security like this. That's just pure. It's just pure security. Just throw them in a pile, right? Throw them in a pile and have Andre go and just like shuffle them around. And the ones that we don't like, we light them on fire. They did light votes on fire. So here's the update. You have 62% expected. Suddenly, it went from 200,000 ballots left remaining. This was yesterday to 322,000 ballots left remaining. Isn't that amazing? Spencer Pratt barely budged in his vote total. He only got like 5,000 more votes, but Nikki Rahman went up significantly. Spencer Pratt has now crashed down below 30%. You can see what they're going to try and do here. They're going to try and shove this filthy communist that nobody liked and nobody voted for over Spencer Pratt because they can't have Spencer Pratt as the spoiler. They just need two libtards running against each other. This is exactly what they've been predicting. Even Democrats, like libtard, like the dumbest Democrats that do this business, Nate Silver is one of them. He's perpetually wrong. He's constantly wrong. Is out here saying this is third world stuff. This is failed state stuff. We shouldn't be allowing this. You know, amazing Katie Porter, who lost in a landslide, sort of gave the whole game up here when asked, don't you need to appeal to MAGA vote? Don't you need to appeal to the 40% of California that's Republicans? Listen to her answer.
What do you say to the 40% of California voters who you'll need in order to win, who voted for Trump?
How would I need them in order to win, ma'am?
Well, unless you think you're going to get 60% of the vote. You think you'll get 60%. Everybody who did not vote for Trump will vote for you. That's what you're saying.
In a general election? Yes.
She got 4% of the vote and ended her political career.
Just incredible. All right. So moving on. This is California based too, of course, because Wolf puts the sheet together. But in this case, he's highlighted something that is fantastic. And Ron DeSantis was making the observation that you guys made on Thursday, which is like, how do we live in the year of our Lord 2026 and California still can't count ballots?
Great question.
How are we into this situation? And Aaron Blake, a perennial contender for Hack Madness, one of the worst reporters in all of Washington, D.C. Where does he even work now? He used to be at the Washington Post, but they laid all those people off.
I haven't kept
None of us know. Anyway, Aaron Blake jumping on Ronnie D's statement to say, not sure I will ever get used to how casually powerful people baselessly seed suspicion about our elections like this. Call California ridiculously slow by all means. But this goes well beyond that.
Oh.
Sort of castigating him, trying to make him like an election denier.
Policing the discourse around why it takes 17 days to count ballots.
Yeah. Well, it turns out one of our own here, Wolf, has got some personal experience with all of this. And so he has responded with graphic 5B. Where he says, if it's a baseless suspicion, why do I, a longtime Virginia resident, have a live ballot for the California primary? This despite repeatedly informing the state that I have left over 10 years ago and that he posts the picture of his ballot.
I bet if Wolf mailed it in tonight,
there's no chance.
It would be counted in a week.
No chance they would not count it.
Yeah.
He could put a note on the top. I just saw the endorsement from the Sacramento Bee, and therefore I must vote for Katie Porter.
Maybe the Zach B's onto something.
Yeah,
It's a late return.
They're trying to influence the count.
Now, what would be interesting is to bite them in the butt that all of the individuals who informed the state cooperates with the feds during this federal investigation to justify condemning and holding the state of California accountable. Wouldn't that be something? Accountability will be back. In the name of accountability, it will actually exist again. But at the end of the day, family, when people can't trust the process, they stop believing in the result. And when they stop believing in the result, the whole system starts to fall apart underneath everyone's feet. And I want to be real with you about something. This is not a left problem or a right problem. This is a system problem. Isn't human nature for individuals. That's why you don't give the government, and that's why it says biblically for those who are Christians that the Bible actually condemns big government because in human nature, there's always somebody that wants to, operate in greed and always want more and more power. And then it's already have been said, it already evidently proven by human nature that you give a person enough power, they will. There is a temptation by us being flawed human beings to abuse it, and that's what you're seeing with this system. Because when you have no voter ID requirement, you have universal mail-in ballots going to addresses that haven't been verified in years, and you have the helicopters flying ballots in from cities that are a car ride away, and you have a final count that takes longer than every other state combined. People are going to ask questions, and they should. And if the answer from officials is just trust us, that is not good enough, because trust is built through a process that is open and consistent and makes sense to a regular person looking at it from the outside, not one that requires you to just take someone's word for it. And in chapter 11, Proverbs chapter 11, verse 3 says, the integrity of the upright guides them. And that applies to people and it applies to systems. A process built on real integrity doesn't get defensive when people ask hard questions. It welcomes the scrutiny because it has nothing to hide. And whatever your faith background is, most people agree on that much. So demand better, stay informed, hold the process accountable regardless of which party comes out on top, because your vote is supposed to mean something. And the only way it keeps meaning something is if the system around it is one you can actually believe in. Let me know what you think in the comments. Hit the like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on your post notifications, spread that peace, love, and positivity. Let the love supersede the hate, family. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.